Welcome, folks, to Dicey Banter, the TTRPG Talk Show, where we speak to all the makers and shakers within the tabletop space and having fun, meaningful conversations while we're at it. And with that, I want to take a moment to put a message of solidarity that I and this channel stand against genocide and ethnic cleansing, and we support all the oppressed peoples all over the world struggling against injustice, imperialism, and colonization. Free DRC, free Sudan, and free Palestine. With that, hello everybody. I'm Valiant Dorian. I use he and his pronouns. You can find me all around the internet at Valiant Dorian or on Otso SpiritBear. Please enjoy that lovely treasure I just set you on. I'm a TTRPG performer, GM, writer, and Twitch variety streamer, and host of the show. And I have tonight the distinct pleasure of interviewing our amazing guests. Hello, and please meet Lynn Codega. They are an entertainment journalist appearing on IO9, Polygon, and one of the founders of Rascal News. They were the journalists that broke the news on D&D's OGL. Lynn, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
You did a real good job. I don't know what else to add to that one. Yeah, I'm Lynn Codega or Linda. Either one is fine. I'm a journalist in the space. I'm a critic and a reviewer and interviewer and investigative reporter. And I write. I just write all the time. I write nonstop.
And you sure do write nonstop. And one of the places that you do write is on Rascal News. And for those of y'all who are unfamiliar, well, I think you should be familiar by now if you're watching this show because we've interviewed one of the founders just before this. Rascal News is a new independent, reader-supported, worker-owned outlet for journalism about tabletop role-playing games and the people who make them. If you can support, and you can support Rascal by using !Rascal in chat to learn more about the outlet and subscribing to them to support them and their work. And if you're enjoying today's Dicey Banter and you want to support my work over here, please consider donating and leaving us a tip. The funds raised will be used to tip myself and our guests to show our appreciation. Please use !donate in chat to support us. And now, with that, there's no better way to begin than by beginning. Lynn, I've got some questions for you. Are we excited to get into it?
Hit me.
Amazing. Well, I have to ask this because I ask this to all my guests because I am obsessed with the idea of knowing everyone's origin story. And I want to know about your TTRPG origin story. How'd you get into this very, very specific, nerdy, niche hobby?
That's a very good question that doesn't have a very direct answer. I first got into role-playing when I was young, 10, 11, something like that. That's primarily because that's when the internet was still expanding in really interesting ways and also expanding into like its own niche communities. And I found myself on role-playing game.
You're fine.
I found myself on role-playing forums, mostly focused on, play-by-post asynchronous role-playing game forums, mostly focused on fandoms that I was interested in. So Avatar: Last Airbender, Harry Potter, X-Men, Naruto.
It's okay. You're amongst friends here.
just kind of like running the gamut of, nerdy interests. There was definitely like a Lord of the Rings one in there. But just sort of, cycling through those. Oh gosh, here's a real deep cut, a Glee one.
Oh, that's a deep cut. Also a fandom I'm unfamiliar in the RP forum space.
It was just like this weird one. I was really into the show in the first like couple of seasons, and I was like, yeah, why not? Because it was just like at that point, it was just sort of a hobby. Yeah. And, like as soon as I got into a show, was interested in it. It was like, oh yeah, fan fiction and role playing forums, obviously.
Yeah.
So that happened, sadly. But yeah, that's where I started. It just like never really stopped. I still do some like play by post role playing today.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I still write fanfic today. Like I think I was literally writing it today.
Thank you for continuing the legacy of like fanfic writers. I used to also write fanfic. My apologies to everybody who's reading my fanfic. They will not have endings. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's always really nice. It's one of those things like I write nonstop. I write journalism, I write stories, and I write fanfic. And just like some of the instant dopamine hit of like getting a little email in your fanfic inbox, it's like you have kudos, and I'm just like, you
Oh
like me,
yeah.
you really like me.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I totally get that as as like a fellow writer,
yeah,
and it does seem that you've been writing for a very long time. So you start off with
yeah,
play by post content and entering the fanfic space and role playing space. Um, at what looking back now as you right now in present moment, when did the like nerdy fandom and all of that turn into your path into journalism specifically? Because I'm looking at this and going, ah, yes, what young Lin did not know is that writing will continue to be in their lives. They've become a TTRPG journalist.
forever.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I was doing. I mean, obviously, like when you're a writer, you always want to
Mm,
write about what you love.
yeah.
No big reveals there. So when I was sort of working my soulless corporate marketing job about
Mm,
6 or 7 years ago, I think even 8 years ago, yeah. So 8 years ago,
mm,
soulless marketing corporate job. I began pitching ideas for articles out to other places, other
mhm,
outlets. So places like Dicebreaker, Polygon,
mm,
Tor.com. Now it's Reactor, but Tor.com when I did it. And just sort of talking like pitching articles to write about fandom and the nerdy stuff that I was really into. And I really, really enjoyed doing it. And it just kind of snowballed out from there. So yeah, it was definitely born of just a really intense dissatisfaction with what I was doing in my day to day, which was
mhm.
evil storytelling.
Yep. Mhm. No,
Marketing
I
is just evil storytelling. Like, I'm
the
sorry.
I cannot wait to tell my husband who does work in graphic design and marketing about the evil storytelling of marketing, and he's going to laugh and 100% agree with you. He's That's going to bring him a lot of joy later.
Yeah, it just like it is,
Mm,
advertising, graphic design, anything that's trying to like specifically influence you in order to like ask you to buy something.
mhm.
Evil storytelling. I don't know, man. Every single car ad is just evil storytelling.
Every time I see a Peugeot ad of a car, evil. How dare you? Uh, no,
Evil
I
storytelling.
evil story. That is so funny. I can't wait to tell my husband that later. Since speaking of evil storytelling, actually, that like pings me onto a very interesting thing that I would love to chat with you about. Is that
Yes.
storytelling is near and deep to your heart. Marketing, and that is evil storytelling. I agree because even in law, I'm legally trained. For those of you who do not know, insurance defense, evil law work. Hated it, hated it so much. Um,
Every single job like career has some like the evil version of
the
itself.
evil version.
There's the light version, then there's the dark version.
Yeah. And you are all the funny spectrum of those career paths. I love that. But and journalism and storytelling has many sort of branches and aspects to them. What do you think? Realizing that evil storytelling is not for you, what do you think your unique approach to storytelling and journalism as a whole is then?
Hmm. I don't know if my approach is unique
Mm-hmm.
actually. I think that it's just I really believe in what journalism is as an institution, as sort of the fourth estate. I
Mm-hmm.
really believe in telling stories that no one else is telling. I believe in telling stories that tell a version of the truth that is as close to honest as I
Mm.
possibly can. Um, and I say that knowing that everyone has biases and everyone
Yeah.
has things that conflict
Yeah.
so even when you like report on something that has like very clear facts, there's still a lot of like implicit
Mm,
bias, even if you don't necessarily see it directly at first glance. So telling a version of the truth that is as honest as can possibly make it,
mm,
you know. And I believe in the I believe in journalism as a service, and I believe in
mm,
journalism as a way to tell stories that need to be told. And I don't know if I'm particularly unique or special in that way, but
no,
I think that it's something that I believe in very like ardently and very like
yeah.
earnestly. Is just like there's a need for that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because even the earnestness and honesty to recognize even saying the sentence of good honest journalism, for example, right? To even say that sentence and to have the clarity of mind to be like, as much as one person in this particular time and place can do so, and that isn't necessarily objective fact of what that looks like, even though we often talk about it as if there is, it's kind of similar to I'm going to relate to this a lot, just being legally trained as a lawyer, because that's also a perspective that comes into play of like what
Mhm.
is object whether you're a judge or whether you're an attorney, what is the objective way to do the service that you are doing, and the most ethical way of doing it. And good, good things to,
Who knows?
who could have guessed the waters are a little murky, and there's a lot of gray area that exists there. It's about the awareness that you carry your service with. You've founded this new TTRPG journalistic outfit alongside Rowan and Chase. We spoke to Rowan just before this about Rascal and the foundation of it.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask what propelled you, the three of you, or you yourself, to move in the direction of making a brand new thing for TTRPG and TTRPG news specifically.
Yeah, I think ultimately it came down to the fact that like I was laid off
Mm,
from IO9, and I got a decent chunk of severance because I was with the union, and I this was towards the end of 2023, just before a lot of the layoffs hit in early
yes.
2024.
Hmm.
But even but like, you know, even in 2023, you could sort of see the dominoes, like if not starting to fall, then
Yeah.
like being lined up,
Mm,
right? So I was pretty sure that like the market was about to be flooded with journalists. I was pretty sure that I would never get I would never like have a job in journalism where I would not have to deal with rich white men who didn't know what they were doing, or venture capitalists who
yep.
also didn't know what they were doing.
Mm,
And it was just really clear that the industry was being broken by a group of people that did not care about the industry and don't care about journalism. And I really love role playing games. And I think that in addition to just like enjoying that medium, I feel like there's still a lot of room for journalists to make us to like stake a place in
mm,
tabletop journalism specifically, because there are so few outlets out there
mhm,
doing the work in the space.
mm,
There definitely are, they are out there, right? There's, you know, I
yeah.
think Polygon, N World, Dicebreaker. There are outlets out there that like do reporting, do good work, but it's not nearly enough, you
Mm,
know?
yeah.
So much still like doesn't get covered. There's still so much interesting work that never gets spoken about. And there's so many different vectors that people can go down to write about this medium. So in addition to just like loving games, it was like there's
Yeah.
a market here.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so generally just like disaffected. I was just mad.
Mm.
And I was like, fuck you, I'm gonna do it myself.
And that is great energy because the as I mean, as soon as Rascal was announced, we saw a huge outpouring of support for the creation of the outlet, the
Mm,
work that it does, and you just said it just now, like this. a plethora, a huge breadth of work that exists within things that you can cover within the TTRPG space, and the news that you could be talking about in that space. Um, I this is I'm just curious when
Mm.
you the three of you kind of ventured into this and knowing that huge breadth of work to engage with in the TTRPG space, how'd you go? All right, how are we focusing on this? Are we covering everything? What's the vibe that Rascal is running with here?
One of the things that we really wanted to do with Rascal and that we like strive to do is
Hmm.
we want to publish work that won't get published anywhere else, either because it is not SEO friendly or because it's not related to D&D or Critical Role or because it's not timely or because it's just like too weird, too niche. Like some if I tried to pitch, you know, the violence piece
Yes.
anywhere else, right? They would be like, why are you talking about this 25-year-old game that's like deeply offensive? And I'm like, because it rips. Because it rips. Because it rips and no one's spoken about it in like,
Yeah.
25 years, but it's still like so pertinent and interesting.
Mm,
And I feel like there is a
25
need to have
years.
it's wild, it's like I think it's like very very poignant that like it's right in between
Mm,
the first D&D game and now is like 25 years. And I'm like,
mm,
is this still relevant? Does it still hold up? And it absolutely does.
yeah.
But if I had tried to pitch that anywhere else, I probably would not have gotten very far
Mm,
because so many other places really rely on non editorial ways of analyzing what to put on their site,
okay.
which is mostly SEO, money, clickability, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm,
So yeah, we really wanted to just say we want to write stuff that we don't think we could put anywhere else.
yeah.
And a lot of that is like Rowan's AP coverage is fantastic,
Yes.
but it's also like really singular. There is not really another site out there covering actual plays like Rowan is right now. There's just not,
Yeah. No, I
which is
love
wild.
it is wild, and like TTRPGs are a growing thing, but it we can all also lovingly and affectionately recognize that we are a niche within a niche, that we
Yeah.
are under the subsection of gaming, under the subsection of like analog slash board gaming, and existing within this kind of interesting nebulous space. And I can imagine that working within that sort of parameter is different than how you'd probably approach journalism, investigative journalism in other fields, for example. So
Yes.
under this gorgeous niche umbrella of gaming, how do you think this impacted the way you do your journalistic work so far?
I think that a lot of it is I am very aware that there is just simply not enough coverage in this
Mm,
space. And I'm very aware that by sort of, staking our place in the industry by
mm,
saying we will cover things that won't be covered elsewhere means that we are sort of saying that like we are going to cover a lot and sort
yeah.
of dealing with that pressure and dealing with like okay, we're not going to cover everything. We can't do that, but we're going to cover as much as we can, as well as we
Mm,
can, is really interesting. And also just being really aware of the fact that, like, Dungeons and Dragons makes like 1,000 times more money than anyone else.
yes. Mm,
It's just like,
yeah. No,
and
it
Wizards of the
does.
Coast, yeah, Wizards of the Coast itself is like a multi-billion dollar brand. It's not just Hasbro's multi-billion dollar brand. Wizards of the Coast, like last
Mm,
year, they just released their like earnings report
okay.
to investors. I get those investor updates. They're so cute and horrible. I hate them. Um, I do. It's like the stock dropped 2 cents, and like here's our new board, and like we're voting on this, and I'm just like, these people have too much money. But I read their newest like earnings report, and Magic the Gathering made $1.5 billion last year.
Holy sh! I am slightly unsurprised with some of the expansions that came. I'm not a magic. For those at home, I'm not a magic girly. I need you all to know that I'm not a magic girly. But even I was like, do I want a set of the Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering cards? Because I
They were
really love
so
Lord of
good.
the Rings. They were all so
God,
good.
it was so annoying. I was like, you guys really knocked it out of the park, and I fucking hate you for it.
I know. He literally was just like, oh, Aragorn is gorgeous. Oh no. Oh no, what have you done?
Oh God, so many emotions, so many
My brother's not
feelings.
my brother's not even a card game girly. Like I collect Pokemon cards, but he has
Mm.
always been like, "What? Why do I care about cards?" And even he was like, these are pretty nice. These are quite lovely, actually."
The Yeah, I mean, it also comes from the fact that like the kind of like depressing fact that Wizards of the Coast is like the largest purchaser of fantasy art in the world.
Oh, is that actually the case that they are the largest purchaser of fantasy art?
It was a few years ago.
Christ.
It was a few years ago, and I mean,
Okay.
like they haven't slowed down. So maybe it's changed. And so don't
Hmm.
quote me on this, but like
Okay.
at the very least, a few years ago, they were the largest purchaser of fantasy art. And it was one of those things where it's like, if you were a fantasy artist, it was like 90%, like there was like
Yeah.
99% chance that you had also like done a couple pieces for Magic the Gathering,
Hmm.
or even Dungeons and Dragons. Like it was a statistic somewhere that like they purchased more fantasy art than anyone else in the world.
Oh my goodness.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I can imagine that that is kind of like, especially as a investigative reporter and journalist. I mean, one of the biggest breaks that has happened for you in the online space and in journalism space and TTRPGs in general was when you broke the OGL news. So I can
Mhm.
imagine that there is a huge amount of pressure after breaking a story like that. Tell me more about kind of like the how you go about as a journalist after gestures to that whole period of time uh that happened.
I mean, I think it's really, you really have to be able to let things go.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where like I'm proud of the work I did. I'm very very happy with what I did, but like I also am very aware like that might not ever happen again, and that's
Yeah.
totally fine.
Hmm.
It's just like I just have to keep doing good work. I have like investigations in the hopper right now. I might never do something quite as wild or impactful as that ever again, which is fine.
Hmm.
It's fine.
Oh, oh,
It's
appreciate that.
it's just one of those things where I think that like you have to really just remember that the good work you do is good work, but it's not who you are. It's not like your my value is not tied up
Hmm.
in the work that I did for the OGL
Hmm.
or the work I did on the OGL. I'm really proud of it. My name is for better for worse forever going to be tied to Dungeons and Dragons, which is just the funniest thing.
I did want to bring it up, but
The
there is
funniest.
it is a very hilarious irony that's kind of occurred in your life where you there is a hilarious irony to the fact that your name is now kind of like irrevocably, especially when OGL comes up, especially when Dungeons and Dragons come up and their legacy that, oh yeah, remember that time that Lynn Codega like broke the news on the OGL. And and I think I have to check the numbers on this, but I'm pretty sure that was like one of the highest views on like D&D licensure that I've ever no one had as a lawyer, no one had been so interested in contract law speak in TTRPGs in so long. And
Never.
I sat there watching everyone give their like 2 cents on the OGL and the language that's within it. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, we're talking about contracts and licensing. Fantastic. Not my bread and
Yeah.
butter, but I am aware of the work in it.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it would be a big story, but
Mm.
I didn't realize how big, especially because it was dealing with literally, like, licensing, like, rights
Licensing.
licensing,
Yeah.
which is, like, I really enjoy because I like, again, I think we I mentioned this earlier, like, I write fan fiction. Fan
Yes.
fiction is all about where you can draw the line at, like, fair
Mm.
use rights and
Yes.
that sort of, like, the given li the implied licenses of a piece of art being in the world.
Mm.
So, the OGL was, like, very specific to, like, my niche interest.
Mm.
And I was like, "I think this is really interesting and, like, fascinating and, like, cool." And I was like, "Yeah, only this is for the real nerds." And then everyone, like, had an
Oh my
opinion.
god.
I was like, what are you guys doing here? Are you okay? Like, are you alright?"
Yeah, I can see why you after doing a piece on like licensing went, all right, this is definitely not going to like explode in the way that it did. But
No, I had
it
no clue.
did. But
It
it
did.
did. Your work was very, very important that day. I think it for folks who didn't know about licensing, I think that was a period of time where a lot of creators did learn about it and learn actually about their rights and their status
Mhm.
as workers within that space in TTRPGs.
Totally. And again, I'm really proud of the work I did. I'm really glad
Yeah.
that I was the one to do it. I'm really happy that I was able to pursue that story in the way that I was able to do it. But also, if that's like the biggest story I do, that's fine.
Hmm. Oh, I 100% appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to the future work that you have got cooking, and I can't wait to read it later on once it is
Yeah.
published. Um,
Yeah.
Amazing. So we talked about kind of a lot of the things that you wanted Rascal to be. You wanted to bring more
Mhm.
news and cover as much as you can, and cover them in a way that stories that don't get to necessarily be told are being told. And we also talked kind of a little bit about giving TTRPG journalism that spotlight, that respect, that visibility that it deserves. What was lacking before in your mind, and how do you see Rascal contributing to bettering the situation other than actually having an outlet to actually report news on?
Yeah. I mean, I wanna be really careful about saying that stuff like something was lacking because I have
Yeah.
such immense respect for
Hmm.
the other outlets in the space.
Absolutely.
So I think it's less of that I think it's not quite right to say that there was a lack, but I think it is
Mm.
appropriate to say that there was not enough,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think it's appropriate to say that, like, considering the size of the industry and how much money the industry is bringing in and how many
Hmm.
indie artists out there are, like, forging new games, new APs, new art forms, there just wasn't a lot of coverage happening, commensurate with that
Yeah.
interest. So I think that it was just the fact that we did not see things that were deserved to be covered getting that
Mm.
kind of coverage. And we just wanted to help augment the
Mm.
outlets that were already there. It's one of the reasons why in our tagline we have uh independent alternative roguelike.
Roguelike.
Yeah.
I really like the roguelike part.
Thank you.
I
I had to convince Chase to leave it in there. He was like, "I'm not so sure," and I'm like, "Please."
So Rowan was telling me about that, and I was like, no, 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 I like roguelike. That's really cool.
It's good, but I did have to convince Chase. I did, obviously, but took a minute. But yeah, that's sort of it. It's like not only
Mm.
are we calling ourselves alternative and sort of like the alt scene
Mm.
sense of the word, but also like we are not replacing Polygon, we're not replacing Bell of
Mm.
Lost Souls. We are simply an alternative.
Absolutely. We love variety, and I think variety is the way that we keep the space alive and keep the art form, the creatives,
Yes, absolutely.
engaged and engaged and in community with one another to be able to kind of like tap into all these different aspects and perspectives and have fun with it and enjoy the TTRPG space and what it can produce.
Yeah. We're really looking to see how we can turn our readership into a community, because
Mm,
one of the things that we're trying to do is obviously be sustainable. We
yes.
currently make enough money to sustain one journalist, which is great. It's
That is
really, really
interest.
good.
That is very interesting. I mean, I'm congratulations. I know that this
Thank
is
you.
a huge experiment into getting and a huge drive to be able to get something like this for
Mhm.
our industry. But it's also a little sad for me to hear because there are three of you.
There are three of us. Yes.
Yeah.
So right now we make enough money to sustain one journalist full time.
Mm,
And we're splitting that three ways.
yeah.
And right now I have another stream of income,
Yes.
um, the novel. Uh, but obviously that's not sustainable. And Chase is also working part time at Dicebreaker.
Hmm.
And we want to get to the point where we are able to sustain all three of us on Rascal.
Yeah.
And yeah, in order to do that, we think that like one of the best ways is to create a community of people who are subscribers, both at the free level and the paid membership level,
Hmm.
and get them involved in what we're doing. Make it so that like
Mm,
we are a community driven force.
yeah.
Um, we're not going to be following the N world and forum model that they have, but
Okay.
it's like they're parallel paths in
Yeah.
interesting ways. But yeah, just sort of getting people involved in the news that we do and getting people
Mhm.
more interested in like pitching to us and writing for
Yeah.
us and like what we're writing and how we go about doing the writing and investigating and
Mm,
reporting. And yeah, we're just really interested in finding ways to turn our readership into a community in order
mhm.
to help make it a more sustainable project in
Yeah.
the long term. But yeah,
Mhm.
hopefully if we can get like a really good, we're going to do like a membership drive.
Ooh, amazing. When are we expecting that?
Right now, very very tentatively we're sort of planning to have it coincide with Gen Con,
Ooh, yes. Trying to remember when Gen
um
Con is.
August.
August. Oh, lovely.
So yeah, we're thinking about it, but it might also be we don't want to wait too far after Gen Con because then we get close to like the holiday season in the
Ah,
winter.
yes.
And that's also when I will start having to promote the novel.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're thinking kind of like around Gen Con to yeah, have a big push to get us to a place where we can like support at least two journalists, if not all three of us.
Amazing. Please keep that in mind. By the time this comes out, it'll be way before August. But keep that posted, folks and viewers at home. And keep an eye out on ways that you're able to come and support Rascal. But you tapped on a very interesting part here about the aspect of community that it's not necessarily only unique to the TTRPG space, but it is a huge driving force that exists
Mm.
within this space that I think is kind of different to a lot of spaces. And creators are very prominent in the TTRPG space and industry. And I wanted to kind of like ask you as a journalist about because I talked a little bit to Rowan about about Rowan's specific approach to journalism. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask about how you are navigating as a journalist around the fact that we are a space that is creator heavy. We are a space that is
Mhm.
community heavy, and how are you maneuvering around this space as a journalist?
We might have very similar answers because we
Okay,
the three rascals have like talked a lot about this and are very
amazing.
aligned with how we approach the larger tabletop ecosystem.
Mm,
And we sort of see ourselves like, while we are friendly with a lot of people, and while there are so many cool, interesting, fun people that like we may consider friends in this
mm,
space, we are not necessarily friends of tabletop.
got you.
We are your friendly neighborhood bartender.
Okay.
you know? Like we can't be um specifically within the community in a way that I think a lot of people are used to having
Mhm.
others network, interact, work, right?
Mm.
Just because our nature as journalists of the fourth estate is to be critics and reviewers and to like be enmeshed in the community and also like apart from it at the same time,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
One foot in the grave, one foot out of it sort of situation. so
Yeah.
so while we work really hard to maintain civil, cordial, friendly relationships with people, which
Yeah.
is like not only like basic human kindness, but also uh sort of like fundamentally we are operating in the same space
Yes.
and we have to respect each other. Um
Mm.
but we are really working hard. And I'm not going to say we succeed at all the time
Mhm.
because there are definitely people that I've met that I'm just like, you, we're friends now. I'm so sorry. Like journalistic ethics, fuck that. We're besties. Um, but in all seriousness, we definitely are trying to make sure that we have crafted appropriate social roles
Mm.
for ourselves in online spaces.
Mm.
And
No,
we are
100%.
very deliberate about how we interact with people and how we think of our relationships with
Mm.
people in the tabletop space. Because I think that there are a lot of people that I would consider my friends in this
Mm.
space, but they're also the people that I would have to report on.
Yeah.
And maybe that reporting is positive, right? Maybe that reporting is like you put out a cool new game and I'm going to talk about it, or you're part of this really incredible project and I want to discuss, I want to like analyze this project.
Mm.
And of course, like when you're friends with people, it just like complicates things.
For sure. Mm, I can
So
imagine.
managing those relationships is very, very important and very much like another layer
Mm.
to reporting in this space that isn't necessarily as prominent in
Mhm.
other reporting spaces. Like if you're a book reviewer, you're not
Mhm.
like the book review the author community is not really like doing massive Kickstarter campaigns or relying on parasocial relationships to make money or
Mm.
relying on how many people like them in
Yeah.
order to make a living.
Yeah.
Same thing with video games, same thing with
Mm.
painting, you know, it's just like the niche, the interesting like you said, creators
Yeah.
community of tabletop means that everyone who is online
Yeah.
in the tabletop community is selling something, trying to get you to give your money to something or
Yeah.
has something that they want you to consume.
Yeah.
They are like, you know, so it's just like there's a interesting relational
Mhm.
conflict that we definitely have to
Mm.
navigate carefully.
For sure. For sure. And I think that's a very, very fair answer to that, because I don't think there's a hard and fast rule on how to be able to necessarily navigate and do this. Probably the only hard and fast rule is that there isn't one, and that you need to be malleable and adaptable to like situations and carrying compassion forward.
Yes. I mean, I
As
think
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. I think the only hard and fast rule I have is like I have to treat people with respect even if I like
Absolutely.
disagree with them.
Mm.
Um and not just in the sort of like ways that Twitter wants us to disagree with each other like over opinions, but in
Mm.
just like fundamental like if we were in the same room I would leave the room.
Yeah.
So just like even treating people with respect when they show up in my inbox or whatever and I'm like,
Mm.
okay, we have to hear them out. We
Yeah.
have to hear what they have to say. We have to treat this story, this tip, this relationship with respect and integrity,
Mm.
even if it's not necessarily Yeah, that's it. You
Yeah,
just have to treat the like sources and tips and people in this industry with respect and integrity, even if they're not necessarily people that you would um be in community with.
absolutely. Yeah, you said that very poignantly, I think. And with that, and on that kind of note, we will take a quick 10-minute break. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. When we come back, we're going to be talking more about critique and TTRPGs. What does it mean? How does journalism and the journalistic techniques lend themselves to it? And maybe we'll also be tapping into more of Lynn's love for game design and cool game design reviews. And with that, please get up, stretch, pet your pets, and tell them Mr. Valiant Dorian loves them very, very much. And we will see you soon. Take care, everyone. BRB. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Dicey Banter, and welcome back to the show. We're here with the amazing Linda Codega, one of the founders of Rascal News and investigative journalist. Before we get right back into it, chatting more about critique, about game design, lots of cool, fun stuff. Remember, you can go and support Rascal using exclamation point Rascal in chat to go and support them, learn more about them, and subscribe to them and check out all the amazing articles so you can get access to if you
Yeah.
support them. And if you want to support us over here at Dicey Banter, please use exclamation point donate in chat to give us a tip. It will be split evenly between myself and Lynn so that you show us our some appreciation. That we appreciate you for that. Thank you so much. And with that, Lynn, shall we talk about critique in TTRPGs and the space for critique?
If we must.
If we must. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. Don't worry.
Yes,
Yeah,
I would love to.
amazing. Well, first
I'm
off,
just giving you a
first
hard time. I'm sorry.
you're allowed. You're 100% allowed to give me a hard time. You're valid. Um, all right, so we've been talking a lot about like critique, especially in when I mean we, I mean the greater TTRPG ecosystem. Um, and this is a lot of discussion. I'm sure folks at home have noticed as well about critique and being able to critique and how it is important in the space. For the folks at home that don't really know what we're talking about and what this actually means, what does it mean, Lynn?
That's such a good question. What does it mean to critique? I think it just means to, God, love something out loud, maybe.
Ooh, love something out loud. I love that. Oh, please elaborate and continue.
I mean, I would not critique games if I didn't love them, right? I would not
Mm,
critique Dungeons and Dragons if there wasn't something about Dungeons and Dragons like at its core that I did not really deeply appreciate and want to know more
mm,
about. I would not do any of this if I did not think that as an art form, as an industry, as like a
mm.
series of disparate communities, there was not something worth saying, worth talking about, worth loving at
Yeah.
the root of all of this.
Mm.
So yeah, I think critique is just loving out loud.
Oh, I like that. Because I think critique sounds a lot very scary. I think like in general because there is an assumption that critique means like critical means like negative,
Mhm.
negative critical, negative critique. So
Right.
it is an intimidating thing, especially since just before this, we talked about the idea about being a journalist in the TTRPG space and navigating a space that is creator driven and community driven in many, many
Yeah.
ways.
And I actually had another thought about that I'll only
Yeah.
like briefly
Yo,
touch on before we go back to critique.
absolutely. Yes. Go on ahead.
um, but I think one of the reasons that we find that so many people within tabletop role playing games are creators and within
Mm,
the online space are like creators of some kind is because
mhm.
games are naturally an iterative thing, right?
Mm,
It's not a
okay.
purely consumptive medium, right? Like if you go to a movie theater and you sit down, you watch the film, you
Mm,
are, and while you're asked to like internally understand that film and internally process that film, you are not asked to like engage with the story in a way
mm,
that has agency.
Yeah.
You are not asked to create the story in a way that has agency,
Mm-hmm.
and you are not ever given control of what
Mm.
you see and experience and feel. Um, so yeah, I think that one of the reasons that we just see so many creators in tabletop is that
Mm.
even by like just being a gamer, just being someone who
Yeah.
like is a casual gamer, you're still an iterative
Mm.
artist, right? You're like, even if you're like, and anyone who's performed in APs could tell you, like, being a player is a generative experience.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that happens. So that means like every single person who has ever played a tabletop game is a creator, is like a generative, imaginative, like expressive person who has put art out in the world.
Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting to think about
Mm-hmm.
how gaming and how this like very, very interesting niche of a niche of a niche
Yeah.
is sort of surrounded and
Mm-hmm.
encompassed entirely by a community of iterative creators,
Mm.
which is probably why we see so many people trying to be producers, like creative
Mm.
producers in the space. Anyway,
No,
just
I
had that
think
thought.
no, I think that's an important thought. And that was something that I did wanted to like tap your brain about. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Because it is so lovely to think about the idea of everyone who's touched and played a game, whether at home, online, in whatever fashion that they are able to, has created a generative piece of art. And it continues. It's a living body. It continues every session upon session upon session, right? And that is so
Mhm.
deeply cool to think about. And
Totally.
now that we've kind of explained a little bit more of the relationships, a little bit more of the dynamics of like artwork and creation within the space, and what critique means, I want to ask you. I've spoken to Rowan a little bit about this, but I'd be very, very curious to hear. I'm sure y'all are aligned on many things, but I am curious about um the standards of critique, like especially as a journalist who you are balancing plenty of plates about objectivity,
Mhm.
about your role, about the space, and all of that. But what kind of standards are we playing with when we are discussing or critiquing TTRPG content out there?
I think one of the big things is that both Rowan and I and
Hmm.
Chase all sort of believe in meeting art where it is
Okay.
rather than meeting art where we think it should be, right?
Okay.
Like the a two-person team putting out a tabletop game,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to hold them to the same kind of standards
Mm-hmm.
as Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
So it's just two different scales
Mm-hmm.
of understanding the game
Mm-hmm.
and or understanding the industry, right?
Yeah.
It's a sliding scale of like, okay, well, what is this trying to do? What were the resources available? How is this utilizing what is at hand?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are games out there that are made like by one person in a basement with like a pair of scissors and a glue stick that is just like fundamentally better games than
Mhm.
Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But I think that like if you were to say, okay, well, I'm going to compare them based on how much money they made and how many people are playing it and how good the art is and what the layout looks like and if it's perfect or if it's not perfect or like if the art
Mm.
is weird or like whatever, then you immediately set uh, people up for failure.
Mm.
So a lot of our measurements and our yardsticks when it comes to critique
Mhm.
start at where the art already is rather
Mhm.
than where we imagine the art
Yeah.
could be or should be or whatever. So yeah, just sort of meeting the art where it is, I think, is really important with regards to
Mm.
critique and understanding the context in which it was made.
Mm. No, that is lovely because I think there's a huge misconception of the idea that there is an objectivity, even when we like critique art,
Right.
contemporary art, right? Of you go into a museum and you go and take a
Mhm.
look at or a gallery and you look at a piece of art. I think there is a slight misconception by lay folks of there is a rubric that exists, this kind of like mysterious rubric that we're all looking at when we critique things. You look like you have
Yeah.
a thought on that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I really like modern art that was, like, made in the 60s and 70s, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm,
Which
mm-hmm.
is, like, an
Very
art an
specific.
art an art era that is, like, very widely contested
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of reasons, a lot of very valid reasons. But also I'm just like, yes, I love being in this room and looking at the different stages of, like, a prepped canvas and thinking it's all fucking art. Because
Yeah.
that's what they were doing, you know? They were literally like, Picasso was still working,
Mm-hmm.
and there's these artists in, like, the 60s and 70s who have decided, like, "No, I'm gonna, like, put up white pieces of paper, and I'm going to deconstruct the nature of a painting. Is it
Mm-hmm.
still a painting if you just prep it? Is it a painting if you put one stroke of white paint on it? Like, at what point do you consider a painting a painting?"
Painting.
And I'm just like, I fucking love this shit. I love it. I could eat it up all day. I'm that pretentious asshole that sits there and I'm just like, this is amazing. This is the
No,
best thing I've ever seen.
listen, as a husband of an artist, he's actually been the one that's kind of like opened my mind a little bit, opened my eyes a little bit about like
Yeah.
art critique and how and he said something very poignant to me, which was because he did art in university, he did art history, and so when I was like, yeah, I know there's a way to look at these things, but I just do not know how. And he literally looked at me and was like, yes, don't worry, my love. It's because it's a skill. Being able to kind of like, especially with like modern art and things like that, like being able to have the eye and like is a skill that you can. It's not a you have it or you don't. You can build it. It can I can teach you,
Yeah.
and like there's like different ways of doing it, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
You are totally right, and I was lucky, like, I went to school and I was, like, an English major, which was mostly, like, critique and analytics, right?
Mm,
It was mostly, like, reading something and analyzing it.
yeah.
So, I was trained in college on how to, like, look at art and how to read art and
Mm,
how to, like, understand art. So, I was really, really lucky to get that kind of education, which
yeah.
was totally frivolous and unnecessary, but god, has it helped me out now, now that I'm a journalist looking at art all the time.
It all
Um
comes together.
it all comes together. But yeah, like I there's just something about like I have looked at enough modern art and I've read enough books on modern art and I've like been to enough weird modern art museums from like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, like
Mm,
like that little like weird moment where I'm like I there's something in my brain that just like it clicks. I'm like I get it. I
mm,
get the politics, I get the understandings, I get it, I get it.
mm.
And there was like a point when I was going with a former partner to like this museum of modern art
Yeah.
nearby, and it was like very specifically Italian modern art.
Okay.
And I was like, so this is what was going on in Italy at this time. Like, let me tell you about the hot summer. And they were like, what do you mean hot summer? I'm like, the hot summer, don't worry about it. I'll tell you. Like the art will tell you. Like you will understand. But it's just like there's something like when you flex that muscle enough, right?
Mhm,
Exactly like you said, where it's like practice, it's understanding, it's reading other people's critiques,
mhm.
it's reading artist statements. It's like, I think I love playtest documents. I love ash cans.
Oh,
I
yeah,
love
okay.
I love seeing something where it is and then seeing something where it ends up and I'm just like, why did you do that? Tell me everything.
Oh, that's so
I
interesting.
love
Oh, no,
it. I
no,
love it.
tell me more about that. No, so it seems like you're very, very interested in, like, the journey of,
Mm,
especially TTRPG work and craftsmanship of like an ashcan to becoming a full document, full rule book, whatever form it takes towards the end.
mm.
Tell me more about that. Has there been a moment where you're like, oh, I saw a thing, it developed, and I had many like lots of good brain thoughts about it.
Hmm. I think that this is something that started as a fiction writer
Okay.
because you write something, you revise it, you break it apart, you revise it again. So you're just constantly iterating on like this idea is good. How
Mhm.
do I turn it into like the sharpest blade I can possibly make
Mhm.
it? So, editing in the open, designing in the open, working in the open, and just
Mhm.
sort of public exposing that kind of again generative iteration to the public
Mhm.
is something that I find fascinating. And I think like I mentioned it with the modern art thing where it was like
Yeah.
at what at what point do we have a painting, right?
Yeah.
And again, journalism. At what point do we have an article, right?
Mm.
And at what point do we have a game? At what point do we have a critic? At what point do we have someone who has gone from just being a gamer to being a creator?
Mm.
Like, there's so much about this space in particular that is like so iterative.
Yeah.
And games are iterative. Like, are constantly building up a game, you're constantly building up a character, you're constantly building up
Yeah.
everything. So, when it comes to game design as well, I'm always very interested in seeing how designers work,
Yeah.
right? And how they go from like, this worked, this works better.
Mm.
And I'm like, why? What were the decisions? Works better for whom? What implicit biases have you brought to the understandings that you have come to? Like, I eat it up with a spoon. I love that shit. And I will fully admit there's like a level of pretension here that I cannot escape. And feel free to call me out on it whenever you see it happen. But there's just, I love it. I just like love watching an artist work.
Mm. I I'm not calling out the pretension at all because what this is interesting. No, this is interesting to me because I am a fairly new game designer. I'm currently making my first TTRPG, just Beast Within. And I've made one page 24 word solo journaling game called Oh Forsaken Dream Seer.
A sad
And
diary. We all know.
we it's very I love listen Clamp and X 1999, the mangakas and anime fans might not know this because it's very niche. Um, but it had a chokehold on me, and that's where that solo journaling prompt came from. But like, it's so interesting to hear like someone who critiques and does like journalism and critique regularly and is trained to do that. And hearing that from you has me as a game designer sit here and think, huh, interesting, because a lot of this is me sitting down at, either at my desk or while my brother's playing video games and I'm watching him and I'm typing on my computer and I go and look at a thing and go, it'd be kind of nice if I had this, huh? Let's try it. And so it's just
I
it's so interesting to hear someone like the observance of someone else upon your work and hearing that approach is intriguing to me as a game designer, which is why I asked because I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm, like, so interested in the Dagger Heart stuff. It's why I'm interested in
Mm.
seeing MCDM does with their design.
Mm-hmm.
It's why I'm, like, less interested, but still interested with, like, what D&D is doing with their playtest documents, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of it's fascinating because it really speaks to how the artist views their art
Mm-hmm.
and the things that they are using to determine the effectiveness of their art,
Understood. Yeah.
which is fascinating to me. And it's also like these artists are figuring out how to best communicate their design goals
Mm.
through trial and error and how to produce like a kind of perfect scaffolding
Mm.
for like the statue that like game design like gamers build at the
Yeah.
table, right? So they're just like constantly like tweaking this mold, right? That
Yeah.
they're expecting to like pour themselves into and just seeing how they adjust that in order to like make
Mm-hmm.
things different, shape the art differently.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Oh, that is really like really fascinating because it's this one of the things you mentioned is this idea of like on game design side of like what standards are we like judging all of this on, and it's making me think not only as your talk show interviewer here but also as a game designer of yeah, it there is this kind of idea within game design of like playability, right? Or like
Mhm.
almost this kind of like amorphous nebulous idea of a standard out there of what is objectively good gameplay loop or like objectively like playability thing. And I remember the article that came out for Daggerheart and the initial your initial thoughts on it, the three of you
Yeah.
experiencing it. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, actually, of this kind of like idea of building the perfect scaffolding, create like how are these standards built? Do you think that we in the TTRPG space kind of have that like objective perspective of what is playable or not playable? um where are
Hmm.
we at, do you think?
Good question. I mean, there's a whole genre of
Mm-hmm.
games called lyric games.
Love them. Love a
So
lyric
so
game.
for people who like might not know what a lyric game is, a
Yes.
lyric game is also called a game poem, where it is a game that has been written not necessarily as like a gaming experience, but as an art experience. Um and as a emotion, like an emotion machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a game out there called Last Cigarette, where it's like
Okay.
you get a bunch of your friends and you all smoke one final cigarette, and you say as like a group, this is our last cigarette, and then you play the game the rest of your lives.
Oh, I like, yeah. Oh, I love lyric games. They're so
And
cool.
it's just like little tweaks like that. It's just like ah! And it's just like it makes my brainbows burn, go all buzzy. And then of course, like if you smoke a cigarette after, you have to like text the group and just be like, I just like I lost the game. We have to do it again.
No, I love
It's
it.
great.
I love it. No,
Yeah,
I
so
truly love it.
so lyric games are experiments in what is and isn't playable. And I
Mm,
think that so many of our game designs have been not only formed but also restricted by the kind of essential wargaming stuff
yeah.
that D&D has put
Hmm.
upon the industry for the past 50 years,
Yeah.
which I touch on in the article that I recently wrote about violence, which is like a satirical RPG that
Yeah.
the author himself has said on multiple occasions and said to me directly, I don't recommend you play this game.
That's how you know.
Just like straight up, he's just like, yeah, this is not really meant to be played. Like it's a
Mm,
game, you can play it, and people have played this game because there's like, character generation and stats and combat mechanics, etc., etc., etc.
mm,
But it is fundamentally not intended to be playable.
mm.
It is because Greg Kostikian, who designed that game, has been designing games since literally the 70s. Like there when it
Wow.
started.
Hmm.
So he just like he's like, it's not that hard to design a playable system. And I'm just like, okay, Greg.
It's like, okay.
Like okay, Greg. I mean, he's right, but also fuck you. Um,
it's the casualness in the way. It's not the
he's
content. It's just how casual he said
I'm just like,
it.
god damn it. Like for you.
I'm like
Um,
me building a D12 system from the ground up, going.
yeah, so there are, yeah, I think that there are standards of playability, and they're still
Yeah.
measured against Dungeons and Dragons in a lot of ways because that sort of assumed failure state
Hmm.
of games is like hard to escape. And I think that there are systems out there that have what pushed outside of that in a lot
Yeah.
of ways. I think the belonging outside belonging system, which is
Yes.
part of like the No Dice No Masters
Mm,
movement is has tried to break out of that like fail state, neutral fail
mhm,
state game design
mhm.
where there is no failure. There's just moves you make in narrative directions.
Yeah.
Um yeah. So I think that there are standards, and I think unfortunately those standards are war games.
Yeah.
Wargaming standards, which is
Yeah.
like, is it playable like as a war game? Yes or no?
Because that's just an experience that I've kind of noticed as well. Is this idea that like whenever I talk to other game designers, and these are usually folks who are typically into more like a wargaming style
Mhm.
design section, but hearing them talk about balancing, for example, and I like
Yeah,
and me sitting there and going, okay, but what if I hate math? But what if I hate math and want to make a funny little game? And this idea of playability in a way that is like a wargaming esque experience, and I've been thinking a lot about that. So it's very affirming to hear that like, oh, it does feel like we have a standard that we inadvertently, whether we realize it or not, are comparing other playable games to as a standard of
totally.
playability.
Absolutely. And I think that like an interesting thing about balance is like I interviewed Chuck Tingle,
Oh,
the
love
world's
Chuck
greatest
Tingle. We
the world's greatest
love.
in his own words. Um and he only plays D&D 2E.
That is so specific. I don't
He
think I've
only
heard of
plays
them.
2E. I'm like, "Oh, God bless you. Bless your heart. Like you're incredible." But he only plays 2E, and one of the big criticisms of 2E is that it is unbalanced.
Mm.
And he's like, "I like it that way. I think more things should be unbalanced." Because he's like, when you go to something like 5E, it feels like a video game where like every choice is essentially the same and you're just choosing what flavor of harm you are able to inflict on another thing,
Hmm.
on your surroundings. Whereas with like something like 2E, it's like, yeah, you could be Gandalf or you could be Frodo. But like that's what you and in his vision of this game, and visions
Hmm.
of like games and storytelling, he's like, imbalance is necessary for tension.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just get like a bunch of people who think they're Han Solo running around trying to be the like main character.
Mm. No, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. I need to read that article because I saw that and I was like, love Chuck Tingle. I did a Chuck Tingle readathon a while back for
Oh,
charity. It was so much fun. Love Chuck Tingle. God bless. Love him.
yeah, and we preserved his formatting and his word choice, so it's all lots of lowercase, lots of caps, lots of trots and buckaroos and
Yes.
styles, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. I like that guy a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I need to read it after this. That's what I'm doing this morning after this lovely interview. Amazing. Thank you so much for answering that. That was very, very enlightening. I know we started in a critique and things like that, and now ended up in game design. Which I love and I'm not mad about.
I mean, it's a lot of it is the same, right? Like
Yeah.
we have to understand game designers in order to critique them. We have to understand
Yeah.
games in order to critique them. We have to understand the art that we're looking at in order to critique it. And there is like, there's value in like an outsider perspective for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sustainable critique has to come from people who understand the medium, right?
Mm.
Like if I went to a ballet and I tried to critique it, I would be like, they jumped really high and that was great. Like what? Like I would know what
Mm-hmm.
to do.
No, for
I would have
sure.
no idea. I would go to an opera and I'd be like, they sure hit some notes.
Wow, that singing was real good. That jumping was also real good.
I liked the costumes. Like
Yeah,
so,
no, it makes so much
but
sense.
Yeah, I would want like someone who really understood opera to critique an opera. I would want someone who
Mm-hmm.
really understood ballet to critique ballet. And I would hope that like tabletop would want someone like me and like the Rascals who love this genre and have like dedicated a lot of our time and energy and our just
Mm-hmm.
critical understandings to even like deepening our education with
Yeah.
regards to this space. I would hope that the space would want that kind of critique,
Yeah.
not maybe not necessarily from us, but just in general.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, from
No,
us it would be cool though.
yeah. Well,
Like,
no,
woof,
I
from
was
us would
gonna
be great.
ask. I was gonna ask actually, is that we're talking. One good thing is that we're talking about this. There's intentionality in the way that we're talking and bringing about critique
Mhm.
in the space right now, right? But I do want to ask you about like from not only the game designer side or creator side or fans and consumer side, but how like what does an environmental healthy critique look like in our medium and in our space, and how can we
Hmm.
continue to foster that actually to make the environment more what is the word like conducive for the Rascals or for any other journalist or critic to be able to participate in this more.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that Rascal, as a news site, draws on a very long history of critics literally just getting a blog spot and just blogging.
Oh,
You know,
Blogspot. Oh, wow. Oh, that's a deep in the trenches memory you have unearthed
just
within me. I'm like, does my old Blogspot still exist now? I have to go and
does it?
check.
You're gonna have to
I
check.
don't know.
But yeah, I
I
mean,
hope
there's
not.
what's on there, buddy? What's on
I
there,
wrote
man?
about writing, and I was very young, I think, and I just
Mm. Mm-hmm.
did not know a lot about writing back
Mm-hmm.
then. Like,
Yeah. Um so so yeah, I think that there's like a long tradition in tabletop role playing games specifically that relies on bloggers blogging.
hmm
And Rascal is looking at that and be like, well, we want to do that like full time for our job. Are you like, can you help us get there? Can like the
yeah.
readers support this? Can you help us get there?
hmm
But yeah, I think that like one of the ways to create a healthy critical ecosystem
hmm
is to have outlets that can support critics.
hmm
I think that's just like long and short of it. I
hmm
think that there's other details you can kind of go into with regards to accessibility,
Yeah.
um, with regards to like globalism, with regards to furthering your education and like even attending conventions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, like the way to create a healthy critical environment where critics can like polish their own craft in addition to helping serve the tabletop community at large
hmm
is to just be able to dedicate the time to do
hmm
that.
Yeah.
And dedicate their lives to that critique and that medium and that craft.
hmm
So I don't know, that's it's just a simple answer is like we need to be able to do it without and survive. We just need to be able to survive doing it.
hmm And folks, can use exclamation point Rascal in chat to go and support Rascal right now. And go check out those articles. This isn't one of those like moments where you're like, oh, I can't even like this is an incredible initiative to go and check out. So please go and subscribe at whatever tier you're able to and help out this journalistic outlet. And as we begin, yes, continue. Do you want to say something?
Even at the free tier is
E-
really helpful.
Even at the free tier. I do want to say I love that you have that, by the way. I greatly appreciate it because I was like, oh, more people can show their love and support for for initiative like this.
Mhm.
As we begin wrapping up, I love chatting and with you, Lynn. It's been such a blast. Um, I'm gonna ask you a big question. Like you don't have to have full concrete answers, but I'm curious about your perspective. Where do you foresee the direction of TTRPG journalism and gaming journalism heading? We've had a big year in gaming, also a rough year in gaming in general. And I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Starting this new initiative, seeing the past behind us, and where we can go.
I think that the past year or so has really proven that journalism needs to be independent, and that niche culture journalism especially needs to be independent, because
Hmm.
if we are relying on venture capitalists to save an industry, we are setting ourselves up for failure.
Hmm.
I think that there just needs to be a kind of more universal understanding that while information wants to be free, it also wants to be expensive.
Yes. Yes.
and I
Yes, it sure
and
does. I felt that
and
deep in here, and I was like,
people always forget that second half of the quote. People always say, well, information wants to be free. And the other half of that quote is information, it's too bad. Information also wants to be expensive. Um, but yeah, I think that just sort of seeing a subscription to Rascal or Aftermath or Defector or 404 Media as an investment in the future of of whatever industry they are covering,
yeah.
I think will be is something that like we as a society should think about a little bit more.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm not saying that like you have to do this in order to participate in the society. That's
Yeah.
not what I'm trying to say, but just like uh I would encourage people to think about the importance of the fourth estate
Hmm.
and how they see themselves in relationship with critics and journalists.
I like that. Yeah, and I hope for that as well. Support your creators, and with that, we should talk about how we can support you, Lynn. First of all, thank you everyone for
Yay.
checking us out and joining us on this interview. Lynn, please tell us how we can support you and where we can find you and all of that. Introduce yourself.
Totally. I mean, the best way to support me is to support rascal.news. If you have $5 to spare every month, we would happily take that from you. And in exchange, you get access to our entire library of articles, with except for one article a week that we keep secret and safe for the higher tier subscribers. But that's it. You get every other article out there that we write. So subscribing to rascal.news is the best way to support me and my work, and also the work of my co-founders, Chase Carter and Rowan Zioli. You can also follow me on Twitter at Lynn Codega, and you can follow Rascal at Rascal_news. But yeah, supporting Rascal financially is obviously like the first thing I would suggest,
Hmm.
ask, recommend. And the other thing is, if you see an article that you like on Rascal, share it. Please. Please. No one is reading my work, but that's fine. Just share it. I have good thoughts, I swear. But yeah, I would say sharing articles is the best way to help us grow.
Amazing.
And that's what we need.
You heard that, chat? Exclamation point rascal in chat. Go and find it. My challenge to you all at home: find an article you like and share it today. That's my fun little Valiant Dorian challenge to you all. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being my guest on Dicey Banter. I really appreciate you being here. And
Mm.
with that, I'm going to just quickly wrap up for myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Valiant Dorian. I've been your host this evening. You can find me on the internet at Valiant Dorian or at Otso SpiritBear. Destroy that lovely treasure I just sent you on. And if you want to keep up to date with all my stuff, I'm on Transplanar RPG every Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, playing Sayir, the misbeloved twin brother of the Trojan one. Does that sound dramatic and sad? Yes. And if you like that, you should watch us. I'm also a game designer. I'm publishing my first ever TTRPG called The Beast Within. The quick start guide will be coming out soon. And our if you want to support more Dicey Banter and my work here as a creator, consider joining my Patreon, even at the free tier. It does help. And you get access to a bunch of really cool posts, my whips, and all of the random creative things that I end up doing instead of doing the writing I'm supposed to be doing. Like alternate rules for playing a weird platypus. Want to know more about that? You should go and check out my Patreon. And with that, we're going to be rating somebody amazing, no doubt. So please stay on, get those channel points, and send them some Spirit Bear love. And thank you once again, Lynn, for being on Dicey Banner. Appreciate you.
Yes, so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Valiant.
No worries. And we'll be rating out soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.